My name is Rajiv Mohabir, and I am a writer and poet that is currently living in the Boston, Massachusetts area, but New York is one of my homes. I lived in New York City for almost a decade, and it's one of the first places that my family moved to when we immigrated from Britain, actually. And Richmond Hill was that home community that we moved to in the 80s. My journey to and through living in and out of and besides my intersectional identities in a Guyanese household has been one of learning to walk the road on my own. We moved to Central Florida in the mid 80s. And so I might have been about 6 years old. We hear Florida and we think West Indian communities, we think Indo-Caribbeans, we think, this is another site of our diaspora. But when we moved, we were very far removed from any of that community, which had not yet started to grow. And so navigating my own sense of brownness in the American South was challenging because there were no folks around outside of my immediate familial community for which I could see some kind of community that we belonged to. Navigating my Guyanese identity was hard. My family and I were all subsumed in a larger kind of South Asian context, and not even South Asian in the 80s and 90s, rather, but Indian, placed into community with immigrants from India, which is not necessarily the case of how we identify as Guyanese people. And so many of you will know that this struggle is real. The patterns of racialization in the United States are hard to break through. My family I grew up in is a very anti-Black racist family. And so some of the earliest hatred that I was exposed to, that I was inculcated in, and part of was this anti-Black sentiment in my family where our friends were not allowed to be Black. We couldn't have Black people into our house. And so growing up in this violent and virulent anti-Blackness was something that I had to struggle to undo. Another part of the hatred that I felt rooted in my family community into the immigrant communities that I became part of later on in life is and was homophobia, and what I would later recognize to be other kinds of phobias around sexuality and gender and presentation. The term anti-man was something that was leveraged against me first by my own familial community. What I found was the constant state of being other was a place that I could also hide in and develop my own sense of writerly skill. I came to writing through this mediation of identities, of being queer, of being a brother, a son, being gender creative when I was younger, into this body that was easily read but not easily understood. Poetry was a place for me, the space of metaphor where I could hide the truth of myself. So what I hope to achieve with my writing, the influences that I've had, and my kind of general politics around my life as a poet and a writer has been about creating a platform for people who identify in ways similar to me, whether it's through queerness, whether it's through brownness, whether it's through immigrant story, whether it's through, being a poet, because what is a poet anyway? Somebody who probably lives poetry and then writes poetry. We have stories that are important. We have songs in our hearts that are worth being sung. There is so much poetic that I see about where I come from, whether it's bora growing from the fire hydrants on a corner in Queens, or karaila, choka that you make with dunking it in salt first, and the way you squeeze it out and you don't eat the seeds, and you put the shrimp in, and you have to eat it with sada roti, and it's the best this way. Hasa, cooking hasa, cutting open a hasa. This is all worth study. It's worth emerging and claiming space in the American Academy, because this is where we are and this is who we are. And so my hope through this whole kind of struggle has been to increase visibility for our community and the kind of social constructions that we endure, that we survive, that we live through. To have my writing accessible to Caribbean people, to queer folks, in Richmond Hill, at the Richmond Hill Library, it means that I am reaching my audience. I'm reaching the people who I see myself as being part of. The fact of it being in that very library is probably what I would say my greatest achievement in this life is. What does love and resilience mean for me? Living itself is a revolutionary act against a state that wants you dead, that also wants your labor, but not your life. And for me, that's been something. And to think about resilience also has been a deep challenge for me personally. I'm so tired of having to live and having to struggle through all of these things that sometimes I don't want to be resilient. And so my strategy for holding all of these things as truths that I have to navigate as a whole being has been to seek and understand the little joys of my life one by one. Some of those little things are, I have a dog. I love my dog so much. And one of these small joys has been to take her on a walk. Daily. I'd wake up in the morning. Another thing that I am so fortunate to have, one of my greatest privileges is that the fact of my partner, my husband, we've been married for 2 years. We've been together for 7 at this point, 7.5 at this point. And being able to have somebody that I could bounce ideas off of, somebody who I could share my day-to-day life with, has been really instrumental to me. Another thing that has been really, really helpful to me has been allowing myself to be a bad writer and to be a bad reader, meeting myself where I am and not putting the pressure on myself. For me, this is what love, radical love is. This is what resilience means to me in this time of oppression that has been taking different incarnations as we progress, as a country.